What's up, everyone? It's AG Reviews, back at it again. Just got back from seeing Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, so let's talk about it. So for me, I am a huge fan of the Mission Impossible franchise. For me, it's like my favorite spy thriller franchise that's out there, and yes, that is even more than the James Bond franchise. I've always just loved this series. I felt like it delivers the goods when it comes to the action scenes and just everything that encapsulates about going to the movie, what I enjoy. Anytime there's a Mission Impossible movie that comes out, it delivers. And Tom Cruise obviously has a big part in that with his role as Ethan Hunt, with the stunts, with the action, with the espionage that these movies have. So this has always been a franchise and a series that I have absolutely adored. For me, I think this franchise peaked in 2018 with Mission Impossible Fallout. That is my favorite film in this franchise. And I did enjoy Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, but I did feel like there was some issues with that film. And obviously, it went through a lot behind the scenes with production delays during COVID and everything. And then obviously with this film, we kind of got the same thing because it had delays because of the strikes that were going on in Hollywood at the time that it was filming. So, I was excited for this film, but I did have a little bit of tempered expectations just because Dead Reckoning wasn't my favorite in the franchise, and there was a lot of issues that were reported with this film as well. So I was mildly, going into it thinking, okay, I'll probably enjoy it. It'll be good. But it might not be the, like my favorite of the franchise, which isn't a terrible expectation to have. So with all that being said, what did I think of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning? For me, this is actually a satisfying conclusion to this franchise, if it is the last one. I felt like it did a lot of things right. Definitely had some problems. I really think that this movie is a tale of two halves, and we'll kind of get into specifics here in a minute. But the things that I go for in a Mission Impossible film, it delivered, right? And if this is going to be the last film, I felt like it did a good job with emotionally wrapping up the storylines that we had going on in this series. But to kickstart my positives on the film, we got to talk about what this franchise is known for, the action scenes, and the absolutely incredible stunt work that everyone in this film involved does, and specifically what Tom Cruise does. The set pieces and the action scenes in this film are fantastic. A lot of them come in the back half of the film. And the last hour and a half serves as basically like a huge kind of end game-esque finale for this series. And they had two different very large action set pieces. One that takes place underwater with like a submarine mission, and then the one that was kind of in the trailers. And they didn't really give a lot of the big exciting moments of it away, but in the trailers with the airplane sequence. And I know before, when the film was in production, I think it was with Top Gun, Tom Cruise had did like a call-in talking about Top Gun from the plane, because he's a madman and a psychopath, and I don't know, I feel like he kind of wants to die doing these things because all the stunts he does are just so insane. But yeah, the set pieces, the stunts, the action, all done masterfully. In those two action sequences specifically, I mean, that is like edge of your seat, gripping type things that are happening. With it being practical, the way that they've always done the stunts in this franchise, it just adds a sense of realism to it. So it literally will make you tense up and hold on and grip your chair with nervousness, because you're like, holy shit, this dude is on an airplane doing these stunts for real. It just adds to it and makes it so awesome, and just so great, and such a milestone with this franchise. And this film has great sequences that stand out to me. Another positive with this film that I really enjoyed is the stakes that are involved in this film, from both a emotional and just global scale of the stakes in this film. It knocked it out of the park. Obviously, like I said, at least the way that this movie is structured, this absolutely could be the final film of the franchise, and they bring the emotion into it with the characters, specifically the characters that have been around and that we've been on a long journey with, they do a great job at having emotional stakes when it comes to these characters. And then, not even just that, this is the biggest story that they've done in a Mission Impossible film. The stakes are absolutely global in this film. They didn't really reveal in the marketing like what is at stake in this film, so I won't get into specifics, but it is huge. Like, I can't imagine, even if they do more movies going forward, that they're ever going to top what the stakes were in this film, because it's truly the biggest that this franchise has ever been. And sometimes I don't like that, but I think if this is truly the final film, I think that it works, and it adds to the emotional stakes with all of the characters involved. And then from a direction standpoint, I really think Christopher McQuarrie is the best director that this franchise has had. And I think visually he does a great job in the film. Like I said, a lot of practical stunts, a lot of good camera work, particularly in the second half. We're kind of going to talk about the first half of the film here in a little bit. But I think from a direction standpoint, he does good, right? There were some mistakes I think that were made, but I think from a direction standpoint, a visual standpoint, Christopher McQuarrie does good and does a good job. Is this the best film that he directed? No, I don't think so. But I think him and Tom Cruise's chemistry with their collaboration with this franchise, I think has yielded the best results out of the franchise. And I think you could still feel that. Like, I think a lot of the best things about this film have to do with those two and when they put their minds together. And then for my final positive, the leading man, Tom Cruise. Just what he puts himself through with these films is an outstanding achievement in its own right. But the emotion that he carries with the character, especially in this film, where it's essentially like everything, they wrap up the series. They call back pretty much to every film in this film, and there are movies that from previous films in this franchise, they tie things together in some of the movies that I wasn't really expecting. I'll say that. There was a lot of flashbacks, and we'll get into that in a minute. But there were some things that were tied in with some of the earlier movies that I just wasn't expecting. So I thought that was cool. And I thought, like I said, Tom Cruise, like the way that he wears the emotional aspect of his character, with all these things kind of catching up to him, and him dealing with all of the sacrifices that he has made, throughout this entire series. It worked. It was a good emotional send-off for his character, and one that I think works as a finale for him. But overall, even though I think this is a good finale for the series, and it is overall a good movie, there is some very inherent flaws with this film. And I kind of talked about it before, but I really feel like this is a tale of two halves. Because the very first half of this movie, like the first hour and a half, is really a convoluted mess. I mean, we're just moving from plot point to plot point. Things are happening just so that way we can get to where we need to get in the second half. And character arcs, I'll say specifically, I won't spoil anything, but with Luther, with his character, it felt like that there was a plot for him in the first half of this film that was just straight up cut out of the movie. And I didn't really like how that happened with the plot. And then there was a few things that I felt like were not explained at all, and then other things that were completely over-explained. Like, there is, how can I word this without spoiling? There is a connection to an earlier Mission Impossible movie that explains kind of how we got to where we are in this film, and I didn't really understand it at all. I just didn't get it at all. It was either, I think it was over-explained. I think they tried to explain it, and it just didn't really make any sense. So yeah, that first half of the film just has so many convoluted plot lines, and the editing, like I talked about, I did enjoy what Christopher McQuarrie brought, but I also felt like in that first half, there was a lot of editing choices that were just very weird. Like, we would be in the middle of a conversation or a scene's ending, and then they just cut real quick, and we're in another location and in the middle of another mission. And it was like no explanation. no understanding of what's going on. But then in other scenes, we're talking, about something over and over again and just repeating things and over explaining things. So I really felt like in that first half, the plot was just way too convoluted. And it felt like it was just to get to where we were in the second half of the film so we could have this big, epic action, multiple action sequences to have an emotional, satisfying send off for this series. And then obviously, with that, it kind of creates an issue with pacing because there is action sequences and there's stuff going on in that first half, but it's not anything that actually has any weight or that you really care about. So, when you get to that second half, it kind of takes a little bit to get going and for you to get invested into it. Whereas I feel like I should have been hooked and already invested in the story and in the movie earlier than what we got with the film. So the pacing, it was an issue. It didn't. I don't even think this movie needed to be as long as it was. I think that might have been the problem, is that we had some extra stuff in, and it was extra stuff that we didn't really care about. And then, like I said, there was a subplot with Luther that I feel like really would have helped the plot and really would have added some emotional beats into it. So I was just very conflicted on how this movie was paced and what they decided to keep versus not keep. I didn't really understand some of those decisions. And then, too, I got to talk about it. I talked about it earlier a little bit. This movie had so many flashbacks. And I'm talking flashbacks to scenes from previous movies that we've already seen. Not like, oh, we're going back in time and, kind of like with Dead Reckoning, how they went back in time and still told the story of, like, Ethan's history with Gabriel. It was nothing like that. I'm talking like we are just full out flashing back and showing you clips of old Mission Impossible movies. That happened way too often in that first half of the film, and it got redundant. I was like, are we really still doing this? Like, they just kept doing it over and over anytime it would reference in the plot a previous movie, and it kind of felt like they were just treating the audience like we were stupid. I didn't really understand that at all. So that just did not work for me at all whatsoever. And then for my last point, I will admit, the Mission Impossible franchise, especially in the last couple entries, has gotten better with having more connective tissue between the movies. The first four really all are like standalone, their own films. And well, even 5 too, but 6 and 7 are really the ones that started kind of calling back to previous films. This film, I don't really think a casual viewer can get enjoyment out of, because it references every single film. It calls back to damn near every single film. So I don't think it really works if you haven't seen the previous Mission Impossible movies. Which, even in Dead Reckoning, in Fallout, those two, I don't really think you necessarily had to see those other movies. Because they kind of did a good job in those films, like, telling you what happened before, with certain plot points and characters. This one, like, I just think you have to watch those films before. And I don't even know, like, if I can say, like, there's movies in the series that you can watch that would be better than others. Like, it pretty much references, like, every single film in the franchise. Maybe besides 2, but even that, it's like, there was probably a clip that they showed of 2 in this film. So, for the casual fan, I don't know if you're necessarily going to get a lot of enjoyment out of this film. And then especially, too, with its nature of it being the final film, you won't have the, like, emotional attachment, to really get hit in the feels like some, like, long-time fans of this franchise will. But yeah, overall, guys, like I said, I did enjoy this film. It's not my favorite in the franchise. It's probably not even going to be, like, top 3. Honestly, it might not even be top 5, if I'm being honest. But it does do a good job, I think, in giving a satisfying conclusion to the series, even though I think overall as a movie, there is definitely some inherent flaws with it. So yeah, on a rating scale, I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. I think for that second half and the action and stunt work and everything in this film, that is enough to at least make this a positive film. And definitely a good conclusion for the series. But it's held back by that first half and some of the clunkiness of the plot and the dialogue. Go ahead and comment below if you've seen Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Let me know what your favorite films of the franchise are. I was thinking about actually doing a ranking for this franchise. And yeah, everyone have a great night.